like a C to me.
Okay, how about now? Let's see. Sometimes that happens. Can you see me? No? Oh. Yes? Oh man, going live. The beauty of going live. No? I don't know what's going
you're
on.
a beautiful C, Carlos, even though
Oh,
like
thank you.
it's a beautiful letter.
Yeah.
All right, we'll start and then I'll fix it, during the session. So, hello everyone, and welcome to another expert session 111. So before I introduced our speaker today, just a few words about our sponsors. So first and foremost, VTEX. VTEX provides enterprise commerce infrastructure used by brands and retailers globally. Hermeet powers digital experiences and professional communities worldwide. We're using Hermeet right now. And Acclaim, they help organizations identify, develop, and elevate expertise through AI-powered intelligence. And just a few words about Evolve. What is Evolve? Evolve is a global private network and operating layer connecting senior commerce leaders, advisors, founders, investors, and operators across markets. The sessions are designed to surface operational realities, market shifts, and strategic patterns shaping commerce globally, often before they become obvious in mainstream industry conversations. So our expert today, Gary Benerofe, founder and GP of Mu Ventures, a venture firm investing in e-com infrastructure, AI native commerce software, marketplaces, and vertical SaaS. Prior to venture investing, Gary led more than 150 digital transformation projects across commerce and retail, working with brands including Nespresso, DKNY, Motorola, Nine West, Body Armor. And what makes Gary particularly relevant right now is his focus on defensibility in the AI era, infrastructure moats, vertical software, operational complexity, founder quality, and why many SaaS businesses are being exposed rather than disrupted by AI. My co-hosts, Olivia Mark, Senior Advisor, operating across commerce, growth, and strategic transformation environments, and Emily Ross, entrepreneur, author, and brand growth strategist working across technology, innovation, and cultural transformation. So just for context setting, AI is dramatically reducing the cost and speed of software creation. That changes the economics of startup, SaaS, VC, commerce infrastructure, and organizational design. At the same time, software is becoming easier to build, competition is compressing faster, barriers to entry are falling, and many previously differentiated products are becoming interchangeable. The interesting question is no longer whether AI changes software. It already has. The more difficult question is, what becomes defensible once software itself becomes easier to replicate? So Gary, I always start our conversations with a controversial opening question. And today, in order to start this, I prepared something slightly different. So Gustavo, if you could share that piece of video that I found yesterday on TikTok. It was from Eric Schmidt, the former CEO.
Last December, Time magazine selected its Person of the Year for 2025. And this time, it was the architects of artificial intelligence. Interesting. It will touch every profession, every classroom, every hospital, every laboratory, every person, and every relationship you have. I know what many of you are feeling about that. I can hear you. There is a fear. We do not know the precise contours of what this transformation will look like. Choose a diversity of perspectives, including, let me add, and if you'd let me make this point, please. If you don't care about science, that's okay. because AI is going to touch everything else as well. Whatever path you choose, AI will become part of how work is done. If you have a problem in the world you want to solve, you can now assemble a team of AI agents to help you with the parts that you could never accomplish on your own. Let me give you some advice. First, find a way to say yes. And thank you very much and good night.
Oh, can't hear you, Carlos.
We've got your picture, Carlos, but your audio needs to be turned on. You back now? No.
You only get half the man.
You know, one or the other. I mean, Jesus, I feel so sorry for Eric Schmidt in that, you know, he's giving a talk that, you know, ideally is going to go viral, but it went viral for all the wrong reasons. So, yeah, bless his heart. But yeah, a good way to kick things off, Carlos, for sure.
But
Can you,
yeah.
awesome. Sorry about all the trouble, but you guys started. Awesome. Great. Exactly. Go ahead. Go ahead, Olivia.
Well, I was just going to say, I think what is so surprising about that clip is how tone deaf he is to the user or the person who is sitting there who is terrified about what their future looks like. And one of the things we see with AI is how do you hold people's hand and teach them how to do these things versus just present it as a given fact and hope for the best. It's for a customer-friendly company. It was a pretty surprising admission.
I mean, I would say that I think he's got the right idea and he just presented it poorly, which is my belief. I'm pretty glass half full on this, but I kind of believe in, you know, Jevon's paradox, which is that you're going to make it more efficient to do things and they're going to be able to do more of those things. And it's going to be different. And I think that's scary. And that's the nature of the booze, right? Because maybe there'll be fewer jobs at Google, but there's more jobs to work for yourself. And I think that's kind of the transformation we're going to now, which feeds well with like this whole gig economy world that we're living in and people having fractional employment lives. Like AI is just a superpower for that. So I would have told the story differently, but I agree with him wholeheartedly.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a broader conversation. That's exactly how I wanted to start. And it's great that you guys kicked off the conversation. It's I think we're talking about maybe the educational system, which doesn't really follow what happens in the organizations, because technology doesn't wait, right? And technology moves at lightning speed. And I mean, we're still at least at the universities, like studying as if we were in the 20s, right? In my opinion. And so how I have two kids. How do you guys then prepare your two kids for what's coming? You know, because I saw a CEO recently saying like they're taking a commerce platform, by the way, that competes with Shopify. They're taking AI to the very extreme in their company. They reduce the labor force like by at least 50%. They're seeing that they're extremely effective in what they're doing, and yeah, they're advising retailers to do the same. So you know, we have kids. I think everyone here, we are all parents. Mine are 13 and 11. So you know, your take on that.
I might jump in on that one because I think possibly maybe mine are the oldest. My eldest is 19 and just started university. So, I mean, you talk about technology accelerating, and Gary's point about Jevon's paradox is so true. You know, Jeffrey Hinton, who's one of the founding fathers of AI, came out a couple of years ago and said, like, no more radiologists, no more, you know, that AI is going to replace that job. In fact, we need them more than ever because it's increased their need and the rate of consumption of the same tech. I actually think third level education is like a dinosaur that's had its legs cut off and the message hasn't yet reached its brain. It is still, you know, the knowledge that we're looking at now, the textbooks can't be printed fast enough to keep up with the rate of change of knowledge, which is why I think cohort-based learning and new styles of education will be transformative. And there are organizations that are doing that in different ways. that have, you know, thrown the rule book out in terms of how you learn and get degrees and qualifications. I would say, though, that you talked about the rate of acceleration of change. I think where we're at is what anthropologists call a cultural ratchet moment. And actually, all of us, as parents, we're in this really weird and uncomfortable position where we have one leg or one foot in the past and one foot in the future, with this cultural ratchet moment happening in between. You know, very much like the printing press or the internet or the automotive engine. It's this rapid acceleration of innovation that is propelling society forward. And our kids will probably look at us and go, what was it like in the before times?
Mhm.
You know, because that's where we are. It's wild. And actually we have the knowledge from before, as in how to do things the old way, plus the cop on to use the shortcuts. And our kids potentially will only have the shortcuts. Like, what's it like always having Google Maps? Will you be able to have any spatial recollection? Like, even, you know, 15 years ago, how many phone numbers did you know compared to
Mhm.
how many phone numbers do you know now? Because you don't need to learn them. Like, our brains are changing and our
Mhm.
children's brains are changing. And so how we actually mold and coach those brains to be cognitively agile, I think that's a huge area that we're not going to solve that today.
Mhm. Agreed. Olivia or Gary, go ahead. You were going to say.
You know, I was just going to say that my kids are 2 and 4, and so I haven't spent too much time thinking. Actually, it's not true. I've spent a lot of time thinking about what the world will look like when they're college age or work age. But as an investor, I'm more thinking about, you know, what is the the moat all the time, and I keep coming back to humanity is still unreproducible by AI, right? You still need to figure out how to be a human, connect with people, whether that's to sell, um, or to hire talent, or to do all of the things that are running companies and holding down a job and earning a living. And I always come back to this thought that, like, running a company is more than automating a bunch of tasks. You can
Mhm.
kind of like build off of that to figure out sort of what is it that your kids need to do. Well, you know, they need to be humans that can interact with other humans and be comfortable not having to do work that a machine can do, and that's actually a boon to their existence, because you can just elevate and do more things that only humans can do.
Totally. And I think adding on to that, I think it's not even just the interactions, it's about the creativity. And I think in this new world, creativity and creative problem solving and looking at things in new ways is going to be even more valued, because AI is only as good as what you put into it. And you need to be thinking out there and out of the box to really get something unique that will set you or your company apart.
Brilliant, Gary. When it comes to investing in businesses, you mentioned something, which is you say that AI is exposing companies that were never structurally differentiated to begin with. So the question for you is, what is AI actually changing inside software markets? You know, you're investing, or you get pitched all the time. So tell us, what you're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I started in this business in 2022 as a full-time investor, you would spend a lot more time on the tech moat, and that tech moat had to do with, like, the software that was created. And you could look at something like NetSuite and be like, wow, that must have taken years to build all those features. And you talk about things like feature parity. Um, we don't talk about that a whole lot these days, right? The assumption is that no, at least software tech moat is, you know, more than 6, 12, maybe 18 months long. And so you're starting to look at different things, right? Like the depth of integrations, the number of parties you're integrating with. Like, is there a regulatory angle? Um, uh, Hardware is sexy again, you know, like things that are just you can't prompt away are where at least I'm focused. You know, you're seeing deep tech have a shining moment, right? Like, and it's been hard in the world where I sort of, you know, maybe came of age as a professional in ecom land, and martech is hard right now. And there's a lot of folks who I know are here and probably listening that are at companies that are dealing with this. They're one of several that sell a thing that sounds very similar. And if you don't have a ton of data so that your model is smarter and faster, you don't have embedded workflow so people are already wed to doing business with your company and your software and your process, it's hard. It's really hard to figure out why you should exist or why you should exist at scale. And so a lot of the questions come down to, what's your go-to-market thing, right? Do you have a special way to get to more people? If we just assume that the execution and the doing is table stakes, and that's like an exaggeration, but it's the essence of the kind of momentum.
I completely agree. And like, I would actually 10x the importance of what you just said, because so much so I spent, myself and Alistair Crowell spent 7 years writing a book about this exact point, which is that most founders spend 90% of their time thinking about features and the product. And in actual fact, what they need to be spending time on is getting people to care. And they're not doing that. And now, when you have an abundance of like this Cambrian explosion of startups because they're building faster. So yeah, you're getting to the launch point faster, but you're still like, it's even harder to get people to care because there's so much noise. So actually, that go-to-market strategy, that positioning piece, the getting people's attention and converting it into profitable demand, like that's still the real problem. In fact, it's now even harder.
Mhm.
And actually, I would even add to that, it's making sure that you are selling a painkiller. Like the number of businesses I see where, yeah, it would be nice to have, but it's not a must have. And I think, it's been so much easier to sell something like that because someone can't build it themselves. Now the stakes have just gotten 10x higher.
I think, I think that's a great point, and I would like to expand a bit on the painkiller aspect and try to infuse the raising capital aspect. Gary, again. So, Gary, speaking of painkillers and raising capital and the role of let's say a VC there, I saw a post of yours talking about what draws you in a founder is a founder that looks for, I'll use a word that wasn't yours, but maybe a smart money or someone who can accelerate them, not necessarily with the money, like, like someone that can accelerate their company in other ways, maybe with network and stuff like that. So what attracts you to invest in a business, and what turns you down, turns you off? I like to expand and speak about solving a pain as well, on the point that Olivia made.
Yeah. Well, I think to directly pick up on Olivia's point, one of the most attractive founder or founding team profiles is a group of folks that are solving a problem they felt. Right?
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, there's no better diligence I can do than talking to a customer who's like, and I ask them, what do you do if this company goes away? And they're like, I have no idea. I lose my mind. Right. Then I'm like, okay, I'm listening. So uh, I think founders that have experienced a problem live and are not tourists who are sort of picking up on a trend that they want to monetize, that's very attractive. Founders that have founded before is also very attractive to me. I have been a repeat founder, and at my best, I was a middling founder, but man, the first time I was terrible.
Mhm.
Second time I was okay. Maybe the third time I'm middling. Like you get a lot better every time. And so that's a huge one for me. I use this phrase a lot that we like missionaries over mercenaries, which is another thing that we like is if you're there just for the money, it's hard. You should be there for the money. Like that's rational. But if it's the only thing, then you're probably going to run out of steam early. Like it's just too hard. And the
Mhm.
money's just not attractive enough after 8 years of pounding your head against the wall. And so there's an element of like, I'm going to do this no matter what, right? Passion. And that might be because you know, their daddy never loved them, or it might be because they were an immigrant founder that has felt disrespected in their new country, whatever it is, some, I hate to be cliche, but chip on their shoulder,
Mhm.
or passion driven element that is like, I think there's kind of nothing more important than knowing that the person won't give up, because there's going to be a million reasons why they should. And it's borderline irrational to take venture capital, right? It's just like heaps of expectations and stress with very low likelihood of success. So you need a proper lunatic. And I'm kind of trying to find all the different ways to tease out the lunatics.
Mhm. Ladies.
One of my favorite shows is Chef's Table.
Uh-huh.
And if you notice, no matter what, season in, season out, like every chef that they feature that has won a Michelin star, they never set out to win a Michelin star. They had to prove their parents wrong. Their backs were to the wall. They were about to lose the family farm. There is this insanity that drives them. And it's one of those things I think about as a parent too. It's that, really well balanced children don't seek external validation. And I suspect a lot of entrepreneurship comes from dysfunction, like
Mhm.
whether it be a, a belief that you can stretch time, or like optimism that stretches into insanity. But uh, entrepreneurs come from a place of, I think, lunacy for sure. And you see it in any realm where there is extreme success, there's an element of madness for sure.
And by the way, I have maybe pulled on that string a little hard in my investing life, because you can go and seek the craziest of the crazy, and you can go too far. You know, I've got a handful of those folks who will remain nameless, but you have the brain power, or let's say they're on the spectrum, there's some kind of autism, whatever, that is amazing for solving the problem, but maybe not for building the teams, right? And then you start to look at co-founding relationships. So like the other thing we look at is, I love two co-founders. Ideally, you haven't spread around too much equity, and ideally the Venn diagram of that which you do, incredibly well, overlaps very little, right? So the classic examples, the technical CTO and the kind of go-to-market CEO, love that pairing. If somebody shows up to me as a solo founder, that's like a slight ding. If somebody shows up with four co-founders, that's another ding, because you worry by the time you're at Series B and the dilution is hit that folks lose the go for it, for whatever part of it is financially driven. So lots of different ways to slice the founder hunt.
Yeah, and it's so true. Like companies that have founders often make terrible business operators. So the craziness that it requires to get a business going is not the same craziness that requires scaling or operational rigor. So actually that scale up inflection point is a really interesting challenge. And everyone kind of goes, oh, we've made it, we're good, we've got revenue, we've got customers, and we're going now. And then all of a sudden you hit these like surprise bumps because they have no idea what's going to hit them.
Mhm. Mhm. Olivia, you've been an operator, an investor, operator. So
Yeah, totally. I fully agree with everything you say. And I think adding sort of a cultural layer on top of it, what was so interesting when what I saw in the US is, I would say we probably value the risk taking much more than I see in general in Europe. And so that was a very hard thing to calibrate for me as an investor in Europe, sort of saying, hey, this is the person I want to bet on. And folks I was talking to saying, oh no, wait, their first startup failed. And for me, that was, oh yeah, but what have they learned from this? It's amazing. I think the other profile I see over here is that a lot of business school, management consulting, and then trying to found something. And to me, again, this is, look, it can work, but it's not necessarily a recipe for success versus getting your hands in and dirty and actually doing something.
All that.
I think on the cultural aspect, and you're all very international here and traveled or had dealt at least with internationals. I think there's something interesting that I noticed in the US, opposed to Europe. Like in the US, when I talk to people from the US, they're like, "It's fantastic. It's it's everything is more." And then if you do this in Europe, especially in a country like Denmark, I would even say, or the Nordics, or um, I don't know, the UK or France. I mean, it's not that you're taken seriously, but it's like it's seen as an exaggeration of sorts. And so understanding that it's very important. And the question perhaps for you, Gary, and Olivia, and I would love you to also to share your perspective, Emily, because you're at the advisory board also uh, at this big event in the US. It's like, have you guys been pitched by Europeans or North Americans and the differences? And like I think that cultural intelligence is, like, from the investor perspective, is also important, right? Because sometimes what the founder has is quite interesting, but maybe they don't have the energy that an American would bring to the table, but they're seeing a big problem. And
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. I'd say my opinions on it are ever evolving, and it's not even just Europeans versus Americans. It's men versus women. It's all the different things you bring to your personality as a founder. I think, yeah, it's probably accurate as a broad stroke that Americans are more brash and probably get out over their skis and the hope certificates that they write, versus the more sober-minded European founders. It's probably not a one-to-one, but it's pretty accurate.
Mhm.
And I have been, look, the whole thing with venture, and this is different in PE and it's different with the friends and family and all kinds of business, but venture is a grand slam swing for the fences, right? And it is
Mhm.
quite intoxicating when you find somebody that can um, talk about how they're going to swing for the fences in a convincing way. Even if it's half baked, you just understand that they have this mindset to go
Mhm.
big. They understand the business model of venture capital. Like sometimes, and I don't know if this is more European founder, but let's just say there's a type of founder that isn't doing that, which is maybe being more honest with you, but they're showing you a projection that's like, look, we're going to double next year and we're going to double the year after that. And I'm like, fail, like you don't understand my business model. That gets me an angry LP, right? That doesn't get me anything. And so it's really just about understanding your audience. And I think you can be from anywhere to get it and understand the model. But if you don't, it just doesn't fly. And now I have made, like all of these things, I've made the mistake of going after the Pied Piper founder who can get his valuation super divorced from the fundamentals of their company. And that often is a crash and burn scenario. But sometimes it's the thing, And so when you're playing a game where you're only hoping to make a 2 or 3 out of 10 matter, the guy who the quintessential American profile here is pretty attractive,
Mhm.
as long as there's true belief, like they actually believe the stuff that they're saying.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Totally. So I've been in France for 7 years. The single thing I miss the most about the US, it's not the bagels, it's not like dirty slices of pizza on the street corner in New York. It is the optimism. And I think working in startups, it's hard. It's a
Mhm.
grind. And if you go in with and look, I'm American, I'm very biased, but when you go in and things are hard in France, c'est compliqué, it just makes it a bit less fun. Whereas if you go in thinking, hey, this is super hard, but hard things are hard and we're gonna have fun doing it, it changes. You can get people to move mountains.
Well,
Mhm.
that's also a proxy for resilience, right? It's like if you can see the opportunity in everything, then you're
Yeah.
likely to, retain the go and the go for it. And as I mentioned already, that I find that is like one of the most critical things.
Mhm.
It's really interesting at South by in Austin. Each kind of country participating has a house. So there's UK house and Ireland house and Germany house, and it's so interesting to see some of the cliches and some of the cultural norms that come across. And yes, it's not a homogenized mix at all. But I do remember mentoring some founders in Slovenia, and I was talking about how important it is to celebrate the wins and to, and this was a room full of PhDs and people with patents, and I mean the most outrageously talented, smart humans, and they were so humble. And it actually took me a while to realize that nobody here wanted to big themselves up. And actually, it's this kind of hangover from the communist era where putting yourself forward and highlighting your own achievements was was at odds to this collectivism, to this idea of like, we're all in this together. So there's like generations of cultural norms and behaviors that are like dissuading you from celebrating your own wins. And so it was really interesting in that room. What we all agreed was, tell you what, okay, you're not going to big yourself up, but when your neighbor or your colleague or your fellow founder gets a win, you celebrate for them. And if everyone agrees to do that, a rising tide will lift all boats. But it is so interesting when you get to see this comparison, and especially when you're forcing entrepreneurs to compete in a global marketplace. So I see this at Techstars London. I see this at various different accelerators that are gathering from across Europe. You're really selling yourself short if you're going in humble, especially if you have, the market validation, the proof, those patents, that defensibility. I do feel that Europeans do let themselves down by not actually like adding that bit of, to Olivia's point, absolutely, that optimism, that enthusiasm, that like sense of joy that can really elevate your pitch. Yeah, it's I think we definitely have lots to learn.
I wanted to add a point to that, which is, and I saw there's a comment, oh, maybe it's from you, Olivia, yeah, about this, the kind of socioeconomic history. Like, I think of myself as a founder, and I go back to like our agency got bought by a company, and they kind of wanted us to grow really fast. And I had been running the company like a guy who grew up rich and then all of a sudden got poor, which is what happened. And I was like tracking our profitability by the 10th of a decimal point, like, and I knew, we were 34% profitable. So, and the new company came in and they're like, grow at all costs. And I was terrible at it. Like, I just didn't have that instinct. Like, I could be an optimistic guy and run the company and tell everybody, attaboy, and keep the culture good, but I wasn't trying to triple the thing. I wasn't a venture backed founder at that point. And I've realized as I look at founders and I meet them, whether it's because they're European or because of their own personal socioeconomic history, some of them are built to be gunslingers and some aren't. And because I am not, I very much recognize those who are and are not. And that is, a borderless characteristic.
I think this also ties back to when and who should go get VC funding. And I think it's cool to go get VC funding. So I see all these businesses that possibly aren't VC backable go and say, that is what I want, and then work really, really, really hard to find the one VC that will back them, versus, the business you just described is a fantastic business and it can be a great lifestyle and it can make people very rich, but it's never going to make a VC rich. And I feel like there's always this disconnect. And I think with AI, that's going to happen more and more. I think it's so easy to get some numbers and to prove some things, but then what do you need the money for? And what is it going to buy you? Is it going to buy you scale? Is it going to buy you reach? And I think really challenging ourselves on that is going to potentially influence who ends up with the VC money, and maybe more people are able to bootstrap.
I have two questions, and then I'll open the floor for the community. But the first one is, when does VC becomes a liability? Because raising VC money, because I see a lot of founders like, hey, we raise VC money, but I think that's just the start. Once you raise money, you have to deliver on what you promised as a founder. So there's this narrative that it's like it's a prize that you won. Fine, you got some money there, but you have an obligation. And I think there's a confusion there, probably because of the media as well, like putting everyone on a pedestal, like, oh, they just raised 100 million, and so what? Like, it's debt, right? You have to pay off that. And the other thing is about moats, and what's your take on creating a defensible company today? I think we touched on a little bit at the beginning of the conversation, but where do you think that companies, they can create real differentiation? Is it through community, founder-led companies? What is it? So raising money and defensibility.
I'm happy to take a shot at the first question to kick us off here. I think about whenever I meet a new founder, let's say I'm getting pitched 5-6 times a day these days, and I started with the conversation off with like, what do you want venture capital for? I'm like, why do you want this expectation heaped upon you? And because the minute you accept venture capital, you have these giant expectations that rarely get met. And so I kind of talk about it like there's a gap between what it is that makes the founder happy and what it is that makes the investor happy. And usually maybe it's more like this. And if that gap is narrow, because for whatever reason, the founder wants to have a huge outcome and that's the only thing that's going to make them happy, this is a great use case for venture capital, because it probably means the business is built for that type of scale because they see the opportunity and are naturally, sort of jazzed to go after it. But the people who confuse venture capital as some kind of goal in and of itself don't realize that at some level, it's like a capital source of last resort. You need to have the very few types of companies that need tons of capital now to be the jet fuel. You then have to take on all these folks who have these outlandish expectations. And so the moons really need to be aligned for venture capital to be appropriate. And I agree with the suspicion that a lot of companies go to raise venture capital that just shouldn't. And I probably push away 80% of the people that show up at my doorstep to just like, hey, this is a great business. I would love to be the CEO of this business, but I do not want to be the venture capital investor. Go find yourself a couple $100,000 of, angels, friends and family, whoever, wherever you can find the money, scrape it together if you need it, and then just start making money. And so anyway, that's my take on that. I'll pause. Maybe somebody else wants to add on or answer the second question.
Ladies, you wanna jump?
Olivia,
Yeah, about when does raising capital becomes a liability, if it's a liability at all. I see more like an obligation, and then Gary was that was his point.
Yeah. I think it's definitely I see it as a liability in so many places when companies grow faster than they should. I was at Blue Apron, which was a VC-backed company. We're consumer. We grew incredibly well. Our private valuation was extraordinary. We hit the public markets. It was, I think we lost about 70% of our share value in the employee lockup period. And I think that was actually a great example of a company that, look, VC made sense for some parts of it, but it also pushed us too far. And instead of being a great $200 million business that was profitable and super loyal customers and you didn't deal with churn, we were $1 billion business that the wheels kind of fell off a little bit.
I think it's really interesting to look at. We're talking about early stage and pre-seed here, but if you look at, say, companies like Stripe who have not IPO'd, and I think one of the things that a lot of founders don't realize is if you are taking on VC investment, you already have to have an exit strategy. And there's maybe some naivety among founders about building a business where their children will work in one day. And I'm sorry, but if you've got VC funding, that's never going to happen because a VC is not going to stick around for 15 years. So you need to look at your timescales. You need to look at your expectations, your exit strategy, and what your plan is. And the minute you take that money is the minute you are handing over some of the control to other parties. And once you're on that path, there's no going back. And I think it's not all money is the same color. So some money comes with doors that it can open and with networks that are incredibly powerful, and some money comes with a lot of friction and pain. And
Mhm.
so I would say to any company thinking about taking on investment, look beyond the money, look
Mhm.
beyond the shiny bits, and ask yourself what's behind it, because what's behind it matters so much more.
It, and maybe to build on that a little bit, not only is all money a different color, but all funds have different strategies, right? So we talked about the idea that you might not need as much capital to build a business these days, right? There's a term people may have heard called seed strapping, where you raise a seed round and then you don't need any more money after that. And that's like a great, that's very different from the sort of factory line venture capital that had been historically the way it worked. You know, you raise the pre-seed, the seed, the series A, the series B, and you sort of go on, you know, the alphabet soup there. If you have a large fund, it's say 500 million or above, or even a couple 100 million or above, and somebody comes to you and say, look, we're going to do the seed round. We'd love you to be involved, and maybe we'll raise more capital, maybe we won't. It's hard for that large fund to get into that business, because if they decide not to raise more capital, they've probably put a ceiling on them that's not going to return the $200 million fund. However, if you go to a smaller VC like New Ventures, we can fund a pre-seed or a seed with, you know, a 500K, $2 million round. And if they wake up and like, hey, we're profitable, we don't want to dilute anymore, we're going to just build a business from here. We have a fund size that is small enough that you could go and sell for 100, 150, 200, 250 million bucks, and it actually matters, right? And we wouldn't have had to put in any more money. Like the large fund who's like, great, I'll give you, you know, $1 million for the seed, but I'm really sticking around to put the 10 million bucks into the A. That the math breaks for them and it doesn't for us. And so it's very true that all venture capital is not the same. There's sort of two markets, maybe three or four even. And a lot of founders, I don't think, understand that and waste a lot of cycles pitching the wrong folks.
That's awesome. Thank you all for your contribution. Regarding moats and what makes companies defensible nowadays, what's your take, Gary? I would love to hear Olivia, Emily as well. I know she's a big go-to-market person.
Yeah, look, we touched on it before. You need something that cannot be built in Claude over the weekend, right?
Mhm.
And it might be a channel partnership that you worked a year to build a relationship for, and you become, you know, the Shopify, you know, premier partner or what have you. It might be some type of community that you own based on your Twitter profile, right? Like it could be regulatory capture, whereby you understand how to get something done on a state by state basis, and you've done the work to be the first to do it, and somebody else is going to need a lot of money in 2 years to catch up. If you're an incumbent, I mean, there's a lot of incumbents out there that have scaled businesses that may have shitty, pardon my French, AI strategies, but they have great data and they have great workflow lock-in, and so they're kind of harder to disrupt now, despite everybody thinking they're easier to disrupt now. So workflow, data gravity, regulatory, go-to-market wedges. These are the things, rather than, you know, the lines of code.
Mhm, mhm.
Totally, fully agree with all that. And I feel like when I look at Microsoft was could have gone in so many different ways, right? Like they could have sat there and created an AI strategy that felt different or felt old school or whatever. And instead, they partnered with someone who was at the cutting edge. They integrated it in every single touch point with the customer, and they were where the customer wanted them to be, or the user. And to me, that was a great example of something that could have, you see so many of these other large older school tech companies just really creating something unrelated to what the customer needs, or trying to build it themselves when it's more about packaging it and putting it in front of people.
Yeah.
My words of wisdom there, and yeah, +1 to everything Olivia just said. Absolutely. Is I'm going to steal from Breaking Bad, and say, don't get high on your own supply. So basically, you cannot believe your own hype. And like, yeah, your AI might be telling you that your idea is great or your go-to-market strategy is wonderful. It's not. Like, until it's proven, until you have customers and customers that are telling you that you are doing the right thing for them, like that you are that painkiller, that's what matters most. So until you actually get people to care, that's all that matters. In to my mind, anyway.
Amazing. So Alexis, welcome. Alexis is a member of Evolve. Go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Alexis. I'm a retail reporter. Very, very happy to see you guys here and having this discussion. I used to work for a startup. I've been member number 8, growing it to 35 people, being in the SaaS retail tech space for quite a while now. Been also moved then to the investor side and saw how things that do not go well if you choose the wrong partner, if the strategies do not align, and if promises that are being done are not being kept. So from that perspective, culture, let's quickly talk about culture of investment. To what extent does culture need to fit when you either merge with a startup or when you invest in a startup as a VC or as a bigger company?
I'll take a
Open to all, please.
I mean, I've been through a little bit of M&A in my life, and the way I look at it is nobody appreciates how hard it is. And so, there's been a lot of talk about these roll-up strategies. I think when people got scared of software, the marginal cost of software going to zero, a lot of VCs are like, well, we're just going to roll up services businesses and roll up this and that and add AI. And maybe some of those are great plays, but having been a part of a roll-up and, my company got rolled up and then we were trying to buy other companies and it was so hard, and everything changes, and forget if it's international, which ours was, and time zones and culture and workflow, and God forbid, I don't even know if this still exists, but the software development life cycle. I would never bet on anybody with an M&A strategy unless they've done it before, because I just think people just don't understand it. And culture it's everything. The minute you lose the people, like you're cooked, man. I think a lot of us probably felt it in COVID. We had this great company culture at my last company, and we were pretty much all in office. And then COVID hit, and we started going remote, and we lost the culture, and we started losing people, and everything kind of went downhill. And then an M&A happened, and it went even further downhill. So I think you're picking on a pretty important point there.
Thank you. Olivia, Emily, and you.
Yeah, I think it's also, as you were talking about it, AI and sort of the M&A, everything you were saying, it just reminds me so much of a bit the challenge with management consulting and some of these businesses that are a little far away from, boots on the ground, what it actually means. And I think AI always looks like a good idea. You can always make it look perfect until you get it in front of the customers. Same with M&A strategies. On paper, so much sense. Perfect. You bring this company and this company, and 2 + 2 = 55, and we're all millionaires. But then the reality is all those minor frictions that don't appear on any spreadsheet, that don't appear in any memo, because they're the little things that people miss, live every single day. And I think as we roll out new businesses faster, as AI accelerates what we're doing, those little frictions are going to actually become more obvious to people, because they'll see them much more quickly than they would have otherwise.
Wait a minute, but that means that what Carlos said before, with communities become more important, and also then HR, and how do we actually build teams, and the feeling of ownership within a company. This is, so being human becomes more important in the future.
Oh, absolutely. I would add one point actually on building teams. I think we're going to see a major shift in how teams are built. Lenny Rachitsky had someone on his podcast last week, and they were talking about how what AI does is it means managers are becoming ICs. So the former director or manager who might have had a team of 10 or 20 can now do so much with AI and a few smart hires, and they can be as effective as that large team was. So managers are now becoming ICs. And so culture, your teams are in almost all likelihood going to get smaller. And so those interpersonal relationships are going to be closer and more tightly knit. And you're going to need people who can effectively work at pace. And so that those communication skills, that trust layer is so important because you're moving so much faster. So the dynamics, the interpersonal dynamics matter so much more. I also think that Herbert Simon was one of the fathers of AI for his work on pattern recognition, and that was back in the 70s. And he coined the expression the attention economy, because in any system where one thing's abundant, the thing that's in short supply becomes the order of the day. And he was talking about too much information. Attention is the thing that's the constraint. Well, today, post Herbert Simon, trust and authenticity is the thing that's in shortest supply, because everything that we see lacks validation. And so trust and authenticity is the currency. It's the thing that matters most here and now until we can sort out this authentication. And when I say authentication layer, I mean, like, can we trust what we see? That level of pure, that basic layer of can we trust what we see, I think it's going to be so important in the next 2 years.
I do believe that, Carlos, this is a full podcast episode that we could do on that specific topic, maybe for the future, because yeah, I think this will touch a lot of our lives in the next couple of minutes. Emily, I have one further. Sorry, Carlos.
No, go ahead.
Emily, I would like to put a finger on one of the things that you said, but you didn't answer. I think it was you. It was about you tell the teams that they need to celebrate more. So me having my first employee now, it's crazy that I feel like I do have the responsibility to focus on celebrating the little wins and the extra effort that we are both going for my business every day a bit more. But like, we're going to the theme park, we're going to an escape room, we're doing like bigger things that are not necessarily tied to an event or a win. But in the everyday business, I feel like it still comes too short in general that we validate how hard we work, even though there is a lot of passion. But like, if you don't do it for the money, then what do we do it for?
Well,
And how
you're
can we
absolutely right.
stir it up? Yeah.
Absolutely. Congratulations, by the way, on growing. And like, I will just be really human for a second, because we're talking about humanity here.
Yeah.
Like, we have one life. It's so bloody short. If we don't, to Gary's point, enjoy the work, if we don't actually, like, what is the point of being here? If we, and sorry, it was Olivia, the enthusiasm piece. Like, what is the point of us going through all of this grind and hard work if we can't actually appreciate the journey? Sorry, that sounds very trite, but you're absolutely, I love that you're doing that. I love that you're going to escape rooms, although to be honest, tech right now does feel like one giant escape room. But no, I love that you do it, and thank you for calling it out.
Thank you. Yeah, if you have any material that I can read into or that I can watch on how to celebrate everyday's wins, let me know. Gratitude journals are a bit high maintenance, but yeah, that's the thing that I do every now and then. So, but we can discuss more of that off the record in our community anytime. That was from me. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Alexis. Anthony, go ahead.
Cool. Hey guys. I was going to ask a very, very different question, but Emily, you mentioned something that kind of hit home, and it's about using AI as a business, as a team. So, like, we're a super early stage startup. Again, we help products get found in LLMs. A few people doing it. We've got a unique way to do it. But our team, there's 3 of us, and we use AI for coding, obviously, like everyone else does, but even for the way marketing is done, for everything, basically, everything is streamlined. And this 3 team, 3 people team, the output is, it's 10 people easily, and what that made me think is, what effect is that having on fundraising? Like, as a I've done some investment personally in the past. I'd expect this as a default now for anything that I would invest into. Is that the case? Is that what people are doing? Like, you know, the startups that you guys are seeing, is that the default now? If it's not, does it get pushed back?
Is the question, are all startups leveraging AI?
Is that part of the criteria that where you would invest into now? Or yeah.
100%. I mean, even when I look at a CPG brand, I want to know that they've got some, you know, AI native things going on, which is basically just reducing their OpEx because they're being efficient, you know. And so, yeah, it would feel awfully out of touch if somebody showed up and didn't let me know how they're, you know, building a business with, you know, half the capital that was required 12 months ago and, you know, a third of the staff, whatever the numbers are. But I would say 100% needs to be there. Otherwise, you're just like, well, what if you can't leverage AI at this moment? What other opportunities are you leaving on the table?
So what effect has that had on the sorry, what's the effect on the fundraise itself? You know, are those kind of mega kind of size rounds going down? You know, instead of raising the million that you would have done.
I mean, I think those mega size rounds are ludicrous, and I don't understand them largely. But it's just not the game I play. I'm sure if you're some, you know, foundational model that popped out of OpenAI and you're doing the next new thing, I get it. You might need to spend on all the fancy engineers and compute and whatnot. But in the worlds where I play, like you're building some, you know, dirty, dusty, sleepy, you know, vertical AI in the bail bonds industry or the senior living industry, or you're in your world where you're in MarTech and you're building, you know, better tools for brands and retailers to get seen on LLMs. Like, yeah, I don't know. I think you raised a ton of money when, you know, like Profound did, right? Like, I'm sure you know them in the space. Like, if you have the pedigree and some of the early enterprise wins to try and be sort of like king made, you know, where somebody's going to give you the most money so you can just outspend on marketing. Well, that's venture 101. That makes sense. But outside of that, I don't know what you're using the money for.
I think what we've seen with AI is that old adage, cost, quality, time, pick two. That's broken, because now you can have, and it's weird. It's like maybe it's a, I don't know, is it a hexagon now? So you can have things fast and cheap and potentially good, but the quality piece might only be superficial. So actually it's down to human in the loop and how much human are you prepared to pay for. Because you can have good, fast, and goodish. And actually, it's about how deep that quality goes. And that's what takes the last bit of human time and cost. So yeah, I think the triangle is broken.
Yeah, I suppose that a lot of that depends on the user, the prompt, shall we say, or how to be able to prompt it into doing it as best as possible. But I guess that comes from knowledge in that area anyway. So, you know.
But also the data, like what it's built on, what the regulations are. I was recently COO of a fintech here in France, and we sort of created an AI strategy, my team did. And it was mostly about how do you build the right frameworks so that we are safe, we are compliant, and we're not building on top of a pile of shit. Because when you looked at the data structure as it was, no matter what we put on top of it, it wasn't going to work correctly. So we spent basically 6 months getting all that ready. And then as soon as we press go, we could go 10x faster. Whereas I think if we had been testing and learning that whole time without really building the structure around how we were going to implement AI, I think we still would have still be working on it now.
Awesome. I want to say one last thing, guys. Actually, it amused me earlier when you were talking about the cultural differences. I raised my first kind of VC investment probably about 13, 14 years ago in London, Seed Camp. And then we went to the US, and I was so English and British, it was painful. Looking back at it myself, like it was like cringe. I'm still reserved. I'm still kind of like that now. But I know when I'm in the States to make a very big difference and change that, you know, really, really make that effort. So yeah, no, it's just wanted to share that.
Vinod, thank you, Anthony.
No worries.
Hey everybody, Gary, nice to see you again.
Nice
It
to see you.
looks like Gary and I are in the same forum, but I never get to say hi to him. Last time we were together, we were at dinner and completely different tables, did not even say hi. So my question is, so I've been thinking about this for a while. Something that you all said earlier, foundation models continue to make it easier and easier to create new pieces of technology to solve specific problems. So as a startup founder, if I take a use case and I think about what can today's foundation models help accelerate in solving the problem so that I can build additional layer on top of it so that I can take the problem solution all the way to its end. Usually what it boils down to is building a piece of software that is coupled with some integration, some business processes, some proprietary know-how to solve for that particular given use case. And then 6 months later, the foundation models level up. And what used to be model plus process now becomes model only, no process necessary because the model has subsumed the process. Case in point, what Claude has done with Claude Design, for example. What used to require Claude plus Figma doesn't require Claude plus Figma anymore. As investors and as entrepreneurs, how do you think about this? How do you think about, no, actually it's an investor question. As an investor, how do you advise your startups to navigate this? Because what they built 6 months ago and raised money based off of, a new startup starting now, thinking about the problem now with the realities of today, are equipped in a much different way, have the ability to build unit economics that look very different than what a startup that started 8-12 months ago was dealing with, was constructively. So how do you advise your investment portfolio to navigate this shift?
Yeah, I'll take a swing at that. And I hope to not just be talking my book, but my book is my belief. And I look at something like design or health or some horizontal use case that the models are creeping into, and I have no answers. I think it's tough sledding. When I look at the more vertical the opportunity, the more niche in some ways, the more unlikely it is for Anthropic or OpenAI to choose to care, right? I'll give you an example of, like, we made an investment in a company called ArcHouse. ArcHouse is a operating system for hospice operators.
Mhm.
And they have a set of integrations that I'm pretty sure Sam Altman's never heard of, right? And it's not just things that can be prompted that make their workflow effective. It's third-party data sets that they've either had to buy or originate to integrate with. It's HIPAA compliance. It's a variety of things that are just not, they're not going to go after. Or if they are, it's going to be in a long time when they've eaten all the other stuff. And so I think one basic answer is vertical over horizontal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'd add to that and steal something clever that my co-author Alistair said recently on a podcast. The world is going to have less unicorns and more, and less unicorns instead of 1,000 tiny horses. That domain expertise within the vertical, if you really understand your customer, if you have a customer, if you have deep domain expertise, and if you understand that vertical really, really well, and you can solve that problem. I actually think if you solve a problem really well, and you understand the domain and you have deep domain expertise, like e-commerce, for example, models can bring in the solution inherently, but you know they're going to have you over a barrel. You know they don't understand your domain the way you do. So I do think domain expertise and that niche fit is going to matter hugely. And if you're smart, you should be able to leverage the platforms that have those models for your own benefit, but retain the customer. My 2 cents.
This goes back to customer relationship as the moat.
Mhm.
Right. And maybe to be like, to build on that, it's human stuff,
Mhm.
right? It's like, what are the things that require you to hop on an airplane, show up somewhere and do a thing? And admittedly, there are fewer of those left, but the ones that are left are the most critical, right? And that's, again, capital, customers, and talent.
Brilliant. All right, so we've reached a bit over an hour now. We have to wrap this up. Perhaps is there a question that I didn't ask that I should have asked today, or that we didn't cover? Gary, Olivia, Emily.
I thought you did a great job. We covered a lot of stuff. I got nothing.
Yeah, it's pretty hard. It's a very high level here. So as I said, it's amazing, but you guys are incredible, and our audience as well. So thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time. Appreciate you, Gary. Thank you. Yeah, what we're trying to do at Evolve is like to have incredible conversations with people from all over the world. I think when we elevate the bar and have diverse thinking, great things happen. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks for organizing, Carlos. Thanks everyone who showed up. I really enjoyed the
Hey,
conversation.
and Olivia, Carlos, bye.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you.